All right, let's jump right in. We're going to unpack a huge philosophical question today, one with some very real-world stakes. Can a group, like a company or even an IT department, be held morally responsible for what it does, just like a person?
I mean, think about it. A big corporation misuses your personal data. So who's really to blame here? Is it the CEO at the top? Is it the individual programmers who actually wrote the code? Or, and this is the big question, is it possible the entire department as a single entity should bear the blame? This is at the very heart of what we're digging into.
And finding the right answer? It's a lot trickier than it looks. It forces us to question our gut feelings about blame. It's not always as simple as just pointing a finger at one person. We have to look at responsibility in a totally new way. And we're going to start with the most common argument.
Okay, so the most intuitive answer, the one most of us probably jump to, is called the individualist argument. It's championed by a philosopher named Michael McKenna, and his view is pretty straightforward. At the end of the day, responsibility always, and I mean always, comes down to individual people making individual choices.
Now, to really get his point, we have to talk about something called moral agency. Basically, to be a moral agent, something or someone we can praise or blame, you have to meet two key conditions. First, you have to know what you're doing, and second, you have to be in control of your actions. Pretty simple, right?
So McKenna's logic kind of goes like this. Moral responsibility needs knowledge and control. He says that this control part is basically just free will. And to have free will, you need to be able to respond to different reasons, including moral reasons. And here's the kicker. McKenna argues that groups, as these abstract things, just aren't sensitive to reasons in the right way. So his conclusion? Groups fail that control test. They can't be moral agents. Only people can.
But, and this is a big but, here's where things get really interesting. What if you could have a situation where the group itself responds perfectly to reasons, but the individuals inside that group have no free will at all? This paradox is the central challenge to that whole individualist idea, and it is fascinating.
All right, to really see how this could possibly work, let's walk through this brilliant thought experiment that gets right to the heart of this paradox. So picture this, a simple school board. Their one and only job is to look at the weather forecast and decide if school should be closed. To make it easy, a computer analyzes all the data for them.
Now here's the twist. The board members are terrified of losing their jobs if they mess this up, so they don't use their own judgment at all. If the computer flashes a big red light because a dangerous storm is coming, they are compelled, by pure fear, to vote to close the schools. They're not acting freely, right? They're just following the machine. And this just perfectly nails the point. The group's decision is perfectly responsive to reasons. If there's a bad storm, the schools close. If the weather's fine, they stay open. But the individuals on the board, they're not free. They're coerced. The group itself has control. It's responding to the reasons, even when the members inside it don't. And we can take this even further, into the moral realm. Imagine a global charity that uses a supercomputer to calculate exactly where to send aid to do the most good, to relieve the most suffering. If the members are, once again, forced to follow the computer's output, then the organization itself is responding to a moral reason, human suffering, even though the people are just following procedure. Okay, so we've seen how a group can have control even when its members don't feel free. But now, let's push this a step further into something even stranger. Let's see how a group can make a decision that literally none of its members actually agrees with. I know, this sounds impossible, right? How on earth could a group's final logic be something that is completely alien to every single person in it? Well, it turns out there's a famous paradox in decision theory for this exact thing. It's called the discursive dilemma. Okay, let's break this down because it's wild. For the group to reach a yes conclusion, all three premises, P, Q, and R, have to be true. Now look at the individuals. Voter A says no to premise P, so for them the whole thing is a no. Voter B rejects premise Q, so their conclusion is also no. And voter C rejects R, so you guessed it, they also conclude no. Every single member personally thinks the final answer is no. But now watch what happens when the group votes on each premise by majority rule. For premise P, 2 out of 3 say yes, so the group says yes. For premise Q, same deal, majority yes. Premise R, again yes. So the group has now agreed to all three premises. That means, logically, its conclusion has to be yes, which is the complete opposite of every single person on the board.
So, yeah, the number of people who actually agree with the group's final logic? 0. A big fat 0.
The group, just by following its own rules, has created a decision that is totally unique and separate from any of its members. It's almost like it has a mind of its own.
So what does all this head-spinning philosophy have to do with our original question about an IT department? Let's bring it all back home and connect these dots to the real world. Well, think about it. When an IT department creates really clear, formal procedures for making tough ethical calls, like how to handle sensitive customer data or how to truly uphold privacy, it starts to act just like those groups we were talking about in the thought experiments.
And this is really the whole point of this entire explainer. A department's structure, its rules, its processes, can be designed to make the group responsive to moral reasons. The department itself can act like a single coherent moral agent, even when the people inside are just, doing their jobs and following their roles, just like our coerced school board.
So this all leads us to a pretty provocative final thought. If a department, or a whole corporation, really can be a moral agent in its own right, does that mean we need to completely rethink accountability? Instead of just blaming individuals, should we be figuring out how to praise or maybe even punish the entire department itself? It's definitely something to think about.